Hello and welcome back to London Cycle Routes. Today I'll be showing you how to cycle from Greenwich in southeast London to Rotherhithe, just south of the river. This ride takes about 20 minutes and you can do the whole thing on quiet streets and protected cycle lanes. By public transport, the same journey takes between half an hour and 45 minutes, so cycling is a lot quicker. If you find this video useful or you just enjoy watching it, then please don't forget to subscribe to the channel, as I try to post new videos just like it every week. I'd also like to say a huge thank you to everyone who supports the channel on Patreon. If you'd like to contribute as well, you can find a link in the description below the video. Alright, let's get going. So we're starting in Cuttysart Gardens, next to the entrance to the Greenwich Foot Tunnel, and we're going to head for the Thames Path. Unfortunately, the Thames Path doesn't run all the way to Rotherhithe, which would be really convenient, but this first section here is really good, especially when there's not a van parked in it. Make sure you stay on the left hand side as pedestrians use the tiled bit on the right, and we've got our own surfaced path here on the left. Make the first turn off into Horseferry Place. The street is called that because from 1812 to 1883 you used to be able to take your horses across the River Thames on a ferry. And to correct a common misconception, the ferry was not powered by horses, it was actually a steam ferry. As we exit Norway Street, bear right and be careful as you cross the road because there can be oncoming traffic, and you'll find yourself on Creek Road, which has a fantastic protected cycle lane running down it. As you can see, it's not just for people on bikes, it's also useful for people using mobility aids. Personally, I think it's great to see the infrastructure benefiting people in all sorts of different ways. This cycle lane is what we call a bi-directional cycle track or a two-way cycle track, and that means that no matter which direction you're going in, you're on this side of the road. Some of the junctions are controlled by little traffic lights, so make sure you pay attention to those. This cycle lane is actually a small part of a longer route called Cycleway 4, which is a route planned and built by Transport for London. That route runs from Tower Bridge and should eventually go all the way to Woolwich in the far east of London. Various sections of Cycleway 4 have been built, including this one and another one closer to Tower Bridge, but there is currently a mile-long gap between two of the completed sections, kind of around Surrey Quays, Rotherhithe. So when that's constructed, hopefully later in the summer this year, you'll be able to cycle on a protected lane like this down the main road, all the way from sort of Tower Bridge through to Greenwich and hopefully eventually Woolwich when that section is completed too. There's also a bit going to Charlton that's already been done. I'll definitely be documenting that on this channel, and I've already done other bits of it that have been done with temporary materials, so make sure you check out some of the other videos on the channel. When that missing link is completed later this year, it'll be really simple to get from Greenwich to Rotherhithe. You'll literally just have to carry on down this road. But for now, you actually have to turn off and take some back streets, and I'm going to show you exactly what those are and the safest and most pleasant way to get there. To be honest, even when this main cycleway is complete all the way through to Tower Bridge, the route that I'm showing you today will still be really useful, particularly for getting to Rotherhithe, as it does cut the corner a bit. It's also just really pleasant, and there are some really nice scenic bits that run alongside the River Thames with a great view that you'll see later in the video. I haven't said much about this cycle lane yet, so let me just say that it's fantastic. As you can see, you could take absolutely anyone down here, including children, and they would have a fantastic time cycling. It really is safe, brilliant, and just what cycling in a city should be about. We're now going to turn off it, however, and go down the interestingly named Dragoon Road. One nice touch on the cycle lane that we just turned off is that there's a dropped curb that makes it really easy to turn onto this street, which is a cul-de-sac and so doesn't have any through traffic on it. There's then a brief section on Grove Street, and we're going to turn into Pepys Park, which has a cycle path running through it. Pepys Park, as anyone who knows London well might have guessed, is named after Samuel Pepys, the famous diarist. Or more accurately, it's named after the Pepys estate, which is just ahead here. The estate was named after him because of his connection and the area's connection with the Royal Navy. We're going to start our journey through the estate by essentially weaving our way through some back streets, which are kind of really just being used as a car park, which is a little bit of a shame as it could be a much nicer public space. It can be a little bit tricky to navigate your way through the blocks here, so if you need a map of the route, you can find it in the link in the description below the video. It's to a website called Komoot, and you can download a file, a GPX file, and that will work on whatever app or device you choose to use. Check out that view though. As we round the corner onto Deptford Strand, which is along the River Thames, you can see across on the other side of the river is Canary Wharf and its huge skyscrapers. It's really quite a contrast to the Georgian buildings that we just went past, which are an old Admiralty administration centre. This section of the route is really simple. It's really just a riverside path, and it's nice and wide and usually not too busy, or if it is busy there's plenty of space for everybody. For this section of the route you really do just go straight, following the river and taking in the views. It's a lovely place to cycle with kids or just for a pleasure ride to see the skyscrapers on the other side of the water. One thing that's amazing is how that view has changed over the last 30 or so years. It's really become a very different sort of place since those first skyscrapers went up in the 1980s and 1990s. As we come to the end of this section of the Riverside Path, there's an interesting point where we have to cross a ship dock. You can see some ships in the boatyard on the left there. Now there's a really narrow bridge over the dock here, and I just want to show you how to do it. You can cycle over it. You can see that there's that sign explaining it, and there's someone else there demonstrating what to do. Unfortunately, it's not super accessible as it's quite narrow, so if you're on a cargo bike or an adapted cycle or a tricycle, you may not be able to get through. You can go around it though with not too much hassle. You just need to go to the left of the dock, and there is a level way around with a much wider sort of section. At the end of this bit, drop down the curb here and turn left onto Rope Street, a nice interesting nautical name, and then turn right into South Sea Street. You can see here that a lot of these buildings are relatively new. They date from the sort of 1980s, 1990s, and it looks like a reasonably nice place to live. This area did used to be a working docklands and is part of what we call London's Docklands, and I have to say I do wish that they preserved more of the old docklands buildings built in the sort of Victorian style. It's not that I don't like what's here now, it's more that there's kind of a part of London's heritage, the docklands, which dominated the city for centuries, and that's now kind of missing and only really confined to quite small bits. Fortunately, one of those small bits is at the end of this ride in Rotherhithe, which does still feel really nautical and oldie docklands. And when we do finally get there, you'll see exactly what I mean. But it would be nice if there was just a bit more of that spread around. You might have noticed, by the way, that we've now picked up another signposted cycle route, and that's Cycleway 14. So if you've made it this far without a map, then all you need to do for most of the rest of the ride is follow the signposts which say C14. You can find those written on the floor, and there are also some signposts. Unfortunately, the path is a little bit variable and hasn't really been kept in good nick. I filmed this around winter time, and you can see there are loads and loads of leaves on the floor which haven't been cleared, which make things very slippy at points. By far the most and worst slippy bit is this path coming up here, which isn't helped by the fact that the side on which you're supposed to cycle keeps switching sides, and I really don't blame those pedestrians for being confused about where they were supposed to be walking. This gate here is absolutely the worst. You can see it's a chicane. It's an extraordinary thing to have in an official signposted cycleway, and you have to go to an absolute crawl there to make sure that you don't slip over, because it's extremely dangerous with these leaves. In fact, I did see someone slip there when I was going through the other day. It's really a bad design. There are some sections around here that aren't on paths and that are just on streets, like here, Archangel Street, named after the Russian city which would have been trading with this port. But the key thing to remember is that most of the streets around here are built in a way that's sort of a natural low traffic neighbourhood. That is, there isn't really any through traffic on them because of the layout of the streets. That's also helped by the fact that the Rotherhithe peninsula that we're on is a peninsula, so there isn't really anywhere for traffic to go except to Rotherhithe. This little rivulet we're crossing, by the way, is called the Albion Channel. It's actually an extraordinarily new water feature, being built in about 1990, and it follows the route of the old Albion Dock, which used to be around here. A lot of it was infilled and drained, and housing was built on it in the 80s and 90s. I think it's a nice touch that they kept that around, because who doesn't want to live next to a river? By the way, this path that we're on here has got to be the worst path on any cycleway in London. If you look at the markings on the ground, The designers can't make up their minds which side they want you to cycle on. As a result, it's a complete free-for-all, with pedestrians and cycles essentially just guessing which side of the street they should be on. So when you cycle down there, you should really just treat it as a shared path, go slowly and make sure you give way to any pedestrians that you see. I think that's the only sensible thing that you can do given the circumstances. We're about to see one of the more downsides of these streets around here. They are, when you take into account the parking, quite narrow, so just one car driving down it means that we can't actually overtake it. Fortunately, there aren't really many cars around here, so it's not really a problem for us, but it's just an illustration of one of the downsides of a quiet way through back streets. We're going to turn right here up past the overground station, which is on our left here, and if you need to take the train here by bike, you can take your bike on the overground at off-peak times. We continue following C14 for a little bit, but we're actually going to break from it just now, so it wants you to turn off left here, but we're going to keep going on to Rotherhithe Street. And although it doesn't look like it quite here, Rotherhithe Street is probably the nicest preserved bit of Rotherhithe. You go under these little vines and you're straight back into the 19th century, and doesn't that look cute? Just in time to stop for a pint at the pub. There are a number of good pubs around here, not just the one behind us. And yeah, so if you've never visited Rotherhithe, I highly recommend it, and Greenwich as well. So this is actually quite a nice tourist bike route. You can go between these two excellent tourist centres and have a little look around. Rotherhithe's not such a big tourist centre as Greenwich, but maybe it deserves to be. There is the Brunel Museum right next to where the ride stops as well, which is worth a visit. Thank you very much for watching that, guys. Make sure you hit subscribe, and thank you once again to everyone who supports the channel on Patreon. You can find a link below if you'd like to contribute as well. Let me know in the comments what you think. Just to update you on the bike situation, this is obviously old footage shot in the winter. I should hopefully have a new bike though in action by the end of the week, and then hopefully I'll be able to get out and shoot some more videos, so I hope that there won't be a gap in the programming. Massive London cycle routes nerds might notice that I've done quite a few videos in South London recently, and that's because I don't have any stockpiled North London footage left. And so that is why we're unfortunately not being geographically fair to people in South London. But then some people have complained we don't do enough South London videos as it is, so maybe it is fair. Either way, let me know in the comments, and I'll see you again next time.